Hello, and welcome back to the Modern Cave Woman Show. I'm so glad you're here today because today's topic is so important, and it's about handling emergency situations. Because even if you don't expect to be one, let's be honest, none of us do. I really do believe it's crucial to your well-being to be able to survive something like a natural disaster, a riot, or even just food poisoning, right? So, real quick first, you might be wondering that since this is a well-being podcast, where's the more general health and wellness information? Because we're covering quite specific topics right now that are current, because I want to have conversations around how to apply those timeless tools and principles to current circumstances to improve our lives right now. So, if you would like more general assistance, though, I have that on my website. There's two free courses, there's no opt in required. You can just go to thecolleenbean.com, click on the free courses page, and browse whatever appeals to you. So, one series is on health and wellness and nutrition, the other is on money and finances. And once you're done browsing there, I would love it if you would pop over to the contact page and send me a message letting me know what you think, because your feedback is so important to me. I want to deliver high value, interesting, fun, all the good stuff, right? And if you would leave me a comment and let me know what you thought, that would help me out so much, and I'd appreciate it so much. All right, now let's get back to today's topic. So, something you might know about me is that I binge learn when I find an interesting topic. And a few years ago, I was listening to a podcast where an expert survivalist talked about the rule of threes. Now, I'm sorry I can't tell you what his name is, I don't remember, but I do remember the rule. So, if you Google it, you might just find him. So, hang in here with me a minute, and I'll tell you the rule of threes in just a second because it's so good and can save you in so many situations. But right now, I was thinking about how we've probably all learned some level of survival in an emergency, usually at school with a fire drill, a tornado drill, maybe an earthquake drill. I mean, we all learn stop, drop, and roll, right? So even though I've never known anyone who started on fire, that information still sticks with me. And it also helps me deal with other emergencies. So, most women I know don't get a lot of this type of training, though, unless we really seek it out. And even then, we might feel like we don't remember all the particulars, so why bother? But I'm here to encourage you to bother because I think it's super important and it's super easy, and you don't have to put a lot of pressure on yourself around it. Keep it really light. And here's my recommendation. So, a few years ago when I heard this rule of threes, it inspired me to go deep and see what my library had for survival manuals, and there were just hundreds. So I binge read a bunch of them. I read a 150-year-old Army manual, and I read modern ones that talked about how to handle terrorist attacks like what happened on 9/11. And I would highly recommend reading one or more if you can right away. Unless you're already really versed in what to do in random emergency situations, I think the average girl who lives in the city like me can really benefit from just reading one of these manuals, browsing through it, maybe take a few minutes every day and just read a little bit, or take a weekend and really read through it and kind of decide what you might need to implement in your life now, or what you just want to kind of file in the back of your mind for just in case. So that's my recommendation. Let me know what you think. If you feel like that would be valuable to read a survival manual or take a course, watch a video, or even just have someone explain it to you. Now, just to kind of put a fine point on this recommendation, I have just a couple questions. I want you to consider them, consider what your answer is, and let that help influence you on what direction you might want to go. So, my first question is, Do you know what to do to get help if your plane crashes and you survive? The second question is, do you really know what to do for a snake bite? Because it's really not to suck out the venom. That's not usually the best course of action. Even though we see that on TV, it's very entertaining. But do you know what the real thing to do is for a snake bite? And this one might really hit you. It hit me pretty hard when I got asked. Do you know how to defend yourself from a potential kidnapper or defend someone who's with you, like your kids or a friend or your partner? Because this can happen anywhere. Even in a grocery store parking lot, someone could box you in and try to take you. So, do you know what to do in that kind of situation? So there are so many other situations to consider. That's why I recommend some kind of general survival manual because they'll touch on lots of different things to help get you thinking. And honestly, I hope that none of this ever comes into your life. But if it does, I can't see how it would hurt to know how to deal with them, right? So one caveat I want to bring up in that I saw in most of these books is that the experts say you need to practice to be effective. Some of them suggest schedules and routines and things like that. And I'm all for it, especially if there's something that could definitely happen to you. Like if you live in an earthquake prone place, you're probably already familiar with what to do, but it probably would be a good idea to kind of refresh those skills once in a while. But here's where I'm trying to really take the pressure off is even if you don't practice, just having that little bit of information in your brain to pop up when you need it is invaluable and, certainly better than nothing, right? So, for example, I know in case of an earthquake to get under something sturdy like a table or even get in a doorway because the biggest risk is something falling and hurting me or killing me. Now, I don't practice getting under a table or in a doorway. I mean, I probably do it, right? If something gets under the table, I go under and get it, and I walk through doors all the time. But I'm not actively thinking about practicing that. Also, I've never been in an earthquake, and I don't live somewhere that's ever had an earthquake historically that I know of. So having this information may not seem important, but certainly if I go on vacation somewhere, I might encounter this, or just having that mindset of what's the thinking process? What's the biggest danger here? How can I avoid that? What's the best way to approach this? It could even be something like finding higher ground in a flash flood because the biggest danger is drowning or getting swept away, or knowing where all the exits are in a crowded building because being trampled might be the biggest worry, and escaping would be the best plan, right? So these kind of just thought processes I feel are really important to kind of bring around to us just on a day-to-day basis, to be aware of our surroundings, even just basic awareness. So this topic is on my mind. Why I'm so serious about it today is because this week in book club, we read a book by a woman who was a journalist who covered some of the most dangerous events worldwide. So she talks about situations I'd never imagine being in, like a real war zone or even just a riot, and how to protect yourself. And she talks specifically to women because the rules are different for women in a lot of situations, whether we want to admit it or not. It can be an issue, right? And so, what really surprised me though in this book is how she talked about that it's easy to get caught up in a dangerous situation at home. Kind of like that example about you could just be getting groceries and someone could try to kidnap you or your kids or whoever's with you. And you don't really think about that on your day to day. You're like, I live in a neighborhood I'm familiar with. I feel pretty safe, right? But these things can just happen. That's kind of the point, right? Like, if they never happened, we wouldn't have to prepare for an emergency and we wouldn't be caught unaware in the moment. So, for an example, just to kind of bring the whole thing to a close, do you even go just to a popular bar? Any group of people can turn into a riot quickly. Any danger I hate to bring up, but someone could attack and then there's chaos. Do you know what to do? Because that could happen any day, right? So this is just why I want this information to be filed away in my brain. And I wanted to recommend to all my ladies to find some information so that you can be calm, capable, you can think clearly because you know you've got it. So that's the end of today's item to ponder. Real simply, have you or would you find it possible or find it valuable to read a survival manual or two or more, however many? And would you consider getting a variety of instruction on a regular basis? So let me know what you think about doing that. Um, I'm really curious to see if anyone else, thinks about this on a regular basis. So the rule of three. Let's get to it. Get a notepad if you want to. It's really simple. It should just stick with you. It just stuck with me, but it's something that will establish a good thought pattern for you in the first place, whether or not you ever encountered this kind of situation. It could even just help you think about what to do if, on a day-to-day basis in different situations. So here's what the expert said. He said, in general, on average, a human being can survive in the wilderness for 3 hours without shelter. Only 3 hours, by the way, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food on average. So you can survive for 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So, the lesson I took away, and I'm trying to share with you here, is that if you do find yourself stranded, the first thing is to find a safe shelter. Not a cave with a wild animal in it, but something safe to shield you from exposure to the elements because sun and cold can really affect you quickly, right? Sunburns, dehydration, frostbite, even just being cold can put your body into a more stressed out situation. So find some shelter so you can start to feel safe and calm. And then you have plenty of time to figure out what the next best course of action is to get yourself out of trouble. And I feel like that can be very calming. And when you're calmer, you think more clearly as well, right? So, sure, you might be thirsty, but you have time. You can tell yourself, I've got 3 whole days before this is any kind of threat. I need to set down and, set up something to catch rainwater or overnight dew so that I have a clean source of water tomorrow. Because he also mentioned no drinking contaminated puddles and lakes and things like that, because that's a whole world of worse than being thirsty if you get sick from drinking contaminated water, by the way. Okay. And then, of course, even though you're hungry, you can stay calm knowing that you have a couple weeks before it's going to be life-threatening. And use your mental energy to figure out how to signal for help, figure out where you are, maybe create a more comfortable camp so you can survive longer. And then start to think about, okay, how do I collect safe food, right? So he also told a little story I thought I'd share about a man who got lost and set up such a good shelter that when the search party finally found him, like weeks later, they all decided to stay there for a few days to rest and recover before going back. I mean, talk about goals, right? Not that I want to be lost in the wilderness ever, but if I am, I'd really like to know that I could create a safe little homestead, maybe, if you will, like that, where when my rescuers find me, it's not just all out emergency and chaos. I feel like that's kind of a goal. So let me know what you think about that, if you know what I mean. And I will wrap this up and leave you with those thoughts. Please leave me a comment. You can send me an email and you can always contact me on my website at thecolleenbean.com. And I'll talk to you again soon. Have a beautiful day, free from crisis or chaos. Bye bye.